We will begin shortly. Um, if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to write them down in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask, and we can begin in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay. I'll wait for some immediate questions. I'm assuming you would have finished assignment 4 by now or are continuing to do assignment 4. If you have any questions, I'll take them now. Otherwise, I can give a broad overview of what week 3 and week 4 were meant to do, and then we can go forward from there. So, any immediate questions that need to be addressed?
Ma'am,
Yes.
so currently 6 students are watching the session in YouTube. So I guess we can start with the live session. They have not joined in the Zoom meeting, but they are watching using the YouTube link.
Okay. So I wanted this to be more of a doubt clarification session. So if they have, can you give me access to the Google Sheet, please, if there are any questions on that?
Actually, there is no queries posted in the form, ma'am.
There's no queries there. Okay. Somebody has just entered the waiting room. Okay. So as I was saying, if there are any immediate questions, I can take them right away before beginning with the official live session. You can also, if you are unable to unmute yourself and ask the question, you can post the question in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can post it as a comment. So I'll wait for another 2 minutes if there are any urgent questions, and then we can begin. Okay. So regarding study materials, I can compile a set of reading lists and I can give you a folder with all the readings that are discussed in class, in the lecture videos, and I can give you a compiled folder. But in terms of like a worksheet or an MCQ, that is something that you have to rely on your assignments to help you with. There are also plenty of practice questions you have for each week, so you can rely on those to be somewhat of a guiding tool to tell you a little bit about what the exam is going to be like. All the questions in the exam are going to be MCQs, so you need not worry about writing long explanations, but please do rely on the lecture videos and the readings that are provided in the lecture videos to help your understanding. And please ask questions on the discussion forum. I am more than happy to clarify your doubts. Now, if there are no other, I hope that answers your question. Are there any other immediate queries that need to be addressed? Feel free to ask me here on Zoom or on YouTube, wherever it is that you're watching.
Hey, hi, I am putting my question in the chat because it's kind of a longer question.
Sure, feel free to also unmute and ask if that makes things easier for you.
Actually, I have got an issue. I usually enroll myself in 12-week courses, and like this semester, I've been going through some issues. So, because of that, there's some sort of misassumption happened from my side, and I enrolled for this course. This is a 4-week course, right?
Right.
So I thought it's a 12-week course, so I missed 3 of my assignments by a mistake, and it was like it was least intentional. It was absolutely like a mistake. I'm accepting it. So, is there any way I could like save my certificate?
That is something that would come under a logistical query, so that you'll have to email the NPTEL team. There are members of the team present here. Maybe they can guide you on who to write to. Um, and Ms. Padmapriya, are you around?
Yeah, sorry.
So I'm just asking if the NPTEL team can help you out with this.
Okay,
NPTEL team?
okay. It's here only. Okay, okay.
Yeah, they're on this call. So
Okay.
just hold on for a little bit and hopefully they will be able to guide you. But this is more of a logistical query, and this is not something that the course TA or the course instructor can help you with. And this is something that the NPTEL team will have to take a call on.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And
please
I
feel free to,
understand. Yeah.
yeah. Do you have
Somebody
any
will
other
do that.
queries about the course contents?
No, 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 no issues. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anybody else has any queries about any doubts, anything that needs further exploration? What are some concepts you would like to be discussed? We would like for this to be two-way, so please feel free to ask. Okay, so I'll just give you an overview of what the last 2 weeks ideally should have given you insight into. In week 3 and week 4, we were hoping to cover in some more granular detail the effects of data and how data are actually socially constructed. Data are not some objective truths that are out there that need to be that you can go and collect, and they are not fact. They are actually influenced by who collects them and under what circumstances are they collected, and they are closely tied to these concepts of democracy, surveillance, justice. And basically, we began week 3 by exploring some of those concepts in some more detail. So in data democracy and justice, we looked at how the case of Manrega tells you a little bit more about how, even though it is supposed to be a datafied initiative and how it's computerized and digitized, how there are so many different hurdles that are faced by the people enrolled in the scheme, and how they manifest as a function of inaccuracies and inconsistencies in the datafication. So this module should have ideally told you a little bit more about how there are payment delays and how there are, when they go to verify their biometrics, they face issues, and how many of them don't get, are not able to, face many difficulties connecting their bank accounts. So this should have painted somewhat of a picture of how not everything that is datafied, not everything that's digitized can always end up in a way that promises welfare in a way that it's envisioned. And this is ideally what this module was supposed to do. And you must have seen the speakers were Sakina Durajiwala and Rajendra Narayanan, both from LipTech, who talk about how there are many holes that need to be patched when you look at such welfare schemes. And how there is injustice based on inadequacies in the way that we think of digital technology. So that was what that module was meant to do. In AI ethics and governance, of course, we've come a long way from when this was discussed. But in this lecture, Anupam Guha talks about the governance and policy landscape and how often policy is always catching up with innovation, and what are some pitfalls of that gap between how regulation exists and how technology innovation is moving forward. And basically, he is trying to challenge this notion of how artificial intelligence and machine learning is not something that is the end-all be-all solution, but it has some very specific ways in which it manifests in real life. And how do those situations get shaped? What are they a function of? And what happens when you do not take into account the social, the political, and the economic realities within which such quote unquote advanced technology are suspended? So this is meant to be a primer lecture of sorts to give you a little bit of insight into what kind of safeguards do we need to think about in terms of regulation, in terms of policy environment, when we are planning on implementing AI-based solutions, especially for welfare, for citizen welfare. And after this, I am assuming you've also gone into the next week. In week 4, it's sort of a part 2 of this initial lecture, where once you've explored the policy environment, in this lecture, he talks about how we can root it in our material realities, and how only when we do that can we start thinking of it in terms of rights and in terms of ethics. How do these technologies give rise to different consequences? What do those consequences and outcomes look like in our everyday life, in our everyday material life? Where can we anchor our discussion on ethics? Because if we have to start to discuss the ethical dilemmas, we have to start somewhere. So we can start that discussion from how we experience the effects of such technology, especially with AI and ML. So that's more of what he's trying to do with this lecture. And it sort of ties in very neatly with where we are today in terms of the proliferation of AI and the amount of access we have to AI and, LLMs. So it gives you tools to think about how these can be engaged with when you're thinking of ethics, because ethics is also abstract. And what do we mean when we say ethical AI, or what do we mean when we say ethical ML? So this lecture was meant to be a primer of that kind, to give you some kind of initial thinking tools so that you can start thinking about how ethical dilemmas will come about and what can you really do about them. So that's roughly what we were meant to cover in week 3 and week 4. And if you have any questions, I'll pause here and take it. Please feel free to write it on the chat if you can't unmute yourself. Okay, if nobody has any questions, then I will move on to discussing some practice questions from assignments 3 and 4. Feel free to stop me if you do not understand my explanation of any point. Now, let's turn our attention to assignment 3, the non-graded assignments. The first question says, consider Dr. Melvin Kranzberg's first law, which states that technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. Which one of the following is an example of this? Now, what we are meant to do is, this question is meant to test the understanding of Kranzberg's laws of technology and how they can manifest in our everyday life. And this appears in the Data, Democracy and Justice module. So, using fountain pen, the options are using a fountain pen technology to either write a letter to a friend or stab someone in the eye, approving and implementing genetically modified crops based on which party is in power, employing various local part suppliers for your solar energy plant. Now, the answer is using a fountain pen technology to either write a letter to a friend or stab someone in the eye. Now, what is the law? What does the law state? The law states that technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. So you're essentially trying to say that technology by itself does not carry itself, technology by itself cannot be great or cannot be horrible, but it is not created in a vacuum, right? So what can you see here? You see, using a fountain pen technology to either write a letter to a friend or stab someone in the eye is very readily a use of technology in two very distinct ways. So this example, this instance becomes an example of how technology is neither good nor bad. You cannot make a value judgment of whether the letter is good or whether you're stabbing someone in the eye and that's bad. You cannot readily make that value judgment, nor is the technology neutral. You can weaponize it in any way you want. So that's what this is meant to convey. The second question talks about who among the following target beneficiaries are the target beneficiaries for the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. This is a fairly simple recall question from the lecture. And you will see that it is pregnant women and lactating mothers who are not in regular employment with the government are the target beneficiaries for this scheme, and this appears in the Data, Democracy and Justice module. And then the third one is a slightly, again, a recall kind of question, but it requires some kind of analysis. So you'll see this following excerpt was discussed in Data or an Anti-Politics Machine, where Levy and Baracus talk about surveillance, but not just direct surveillance. They say associates using tablet devices, for example, can identify a particular customer by his or her loyalty card number or other identifying data such as email address or phone number. With a clienteling solution, the associate now has data such as the individual's purchase history, her overall value to the retailer across multiple channels, and her responses to recent promotional efforts. What is the concept being discussed? Now we see that you have data for one kind of category, but through that you're able to access other kind of things. It's not direct surveillance. It's a concept called refractive surveillance. It's helpful to think of diffraction in physics and how you can think of the path that light follows and how it's not a direct reflection. In a similar manner, refractive surveillance is not does not convey how you collect data for one thing and you surveil only for one thing. No. When you collect data for one thing and you use it to understand other features of somebody's life, it becomes refractive surveillance. There is an indirect surveillance, and that's what this is meant to capture. So that's roughly it for the practice assignment for this module. If anybody has any questions, I'll pause here for about a minute and then quickly move on to the next one. Please feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, or type your query in the chat box. Okay, I'll quickly move on to assignment 4. Assignment 4 is meant to test a lot of the questions and concepts discussed in week 4, which means that there is a lot on materializing ethics and looking at how we can think of a roadmap. So let's go to the first question. It says a magazine article that you're interested in has a paywall. This makes the article the options are selective digital good, public good, quasi-private good, or club good. Now, you should have encountered the definitions of public good or club good in many of the lectures, but also specifically this week's lectures. Now, what is a public good? A public good is something that is non-rivalrous, and non-rivalrous means something that is my use of the good does not depreciate your use of the good. So that is non-rivalrous, and a public good is also something that is, one second. Sorry. Yeah. So a public good is something that is non-rivalrous. Like I mentioned before, non-rivalrous means that my use of it cannot diminish your use of it. Like for example, if you take an apple, if I bite into the apple, I have taken a part of the apple, which means that part is not available to you. So it is not a public good. But if I take, for example, the air we breathe, me breathing the air does not deprive you of any air. So air is a public good. What we're talking about is a magazine article here that you have to pay for, which means there's already an entry barrier. Public goods are also non-excludable, which means everyone should have access to it. like we just spoke about the air, right? Everyone has access to air. Quality of air is a different thing altogether, but everyone has access to air. Now, because there is a paywall, it very apparently confirms that this cannot be a public good. So that option is ruled out. So then you have a selective digital good, you have a quasi-private good, you have a club good. Now, quasi-private good and selective digital good are not really core concepts that are discussed. These are terms that you can think of otherwise, but they're not conceptually relevant here. Now, what is a club good? A club good is something that requires you, that has certain prerequisites. Like you can think of it as a club membership. For example, if you need access to a certain amenity within a club, you need to be a member. You need to pay, whether that's monetarily or through other kinds, is something that depends on the club. So club good, by definition, has a certain prerequisite to it. And if you meet that prerequisite, you become part of that club. Now, because this has a paywall, if you have the means or if you have a subscription, that means that you are entitled to access this article. Now, the subscription is what makes you part of the club that has access to this article. So therefore, this magazine article that you're trying to access that's behind a paywall becomes a club good. The next question talks about some of the statements that were made in this lecture and how you can challenge which of these is true or not. Now, AI is automation. Not all AI is automation. AI is also aided in some ways through humans. So AIs don't 100% replace humans. And even though we've come a long way from when this lecture was made, that still holds true today. There are levels of automation, but the human has not been completely eliminated. And not all tasks have been completely automated. And there are various reasons for that, but AI does not equal automation. So that statement is untrue. AI involves automation. Sure, there are degrees of automation involved in AI, so this statement could be true. Data is synonymous with intelligence. No, once again, data and intelligence are two very different things. Intelligence depends on embedded cognition. It depends on the person who is analyzing the data. It depends on the context within which the data was collected. It depends on the context within which the data is being analyzed. So data is not synonymous with intelligence. Intelligence requires a lot more context specificities. So this is also incorrect. So the correct answer is AI involves automation. So there is a certain extent, to a certain extent, varying degrees of automation within AI. Now, yes, Anjali, thank you for your query. We will connect you in a moment. Okay. NPTEL team. Okay, we will move on. So this is the concept of time horizon. And you can see that this is, there are two statements that talk about time horizon. Time horizon is a concept that is discussed in the lecture on a materialist conception of AI and ethics. Now, time horizon refers to a period of time an investor expects to hold an investment, okay? And until they need the money back. Now, think of it this way. The second statement reveals that you are currently saving for a down payment on a house that you expect to pay in a couple of years' time. What is your time horizon in this case? Now, correlate the second statement with the first statement. First statement says the time that one holds on to an investment, which means that you're not spending that money anywhere else. So what happens then? You're saving for the down payment and you expect to pay in a couple of years' time. You're not currently paying. There is no mention of a loan here. So the first statement does not apply. The second one is from now till you pay the down payment. Till you pay the down payment, you're still holding on to that sum. You're not spending it anywhere else. And then once you pay that, that money is out of your control. So the second option holds closest to what the time horizon is. What is the third option? From now till you own the house. That's also not true because till you own the house, that is further away. And you also have this concept of mortgage or EMI involved in that. And that doesn't match with this first statement that is described here. So ownership of the house is not relevant to evaluating time horizon. From now till you resell the house and make a profit. That again depends on getting your money back, and that does not correlate with this first statement that is mentioned here. So the correct option here is option B, from now till you pay the down payment, which is you hold on to an investment and then you make the payment in a couple of years' time. Any questions regarding this? Okay. Next question. Which of the following is not a contributor to tragedy of the commons? Now, what is tragedy of the commons? Tragedy of the commons is a situation where individuals, when they act in their own self-interest, what they do is they completely deplete a shared resource. And what happens then is it leads to severe degradation of that resource that was meant to be served, that was meant to serve everybody. So because a few are acting in their self-interest, many others who do not otherwise act in their self-interest are also deprived of their right to that resource. You can think of anything that's happening in the context of climate change today and think of it as a tragedy of the commons. Now, what is not a contributor of the tragedy of the commons? Short-term self-interest, that is the definition of a tragedy of the commons. Too many beneficiaries. We can think about that. Can too many beneficiaries mean that less resources are available for everyone? Maybe. Too few resources. Definitely, if there are too few resources, that means there is less available to be divided between whoever it is meant for, which means many can lay claim on it and many can deplete it for their self-interest. Inadequate funds. This is the most odd response out of the other three, because the other three have directly to do with the amount of the resources available and how self-interest and number of beneficiaries can act on it, and how there is a direct correlation to depletion with the first three options. But inadequate funds, tragedy of the commons does not, at least directly from the definition, make any connection to funds or money and the availability of resources. And because that connection does not exist in the context of this course, that is the correct answer. It does not represent as a contributor to the tragedy of the commons. And come to the last question. A website collects information about your age group, gender, and preferences in clothing based on your activity. We can also think of this as some form of refractive surveillance, what we just discussed in the previous assignment. Which of the following is true in this case? Select more than one if applicable. You need not select more than one, and there are two correct answers, but both are equally true. One implies the other. So the correct options are you are performing invisible labor and you are performing atomized labor. Now, what do these mean? Of course, the options 2 and 4 are not correct because A, your consent is not involved in this. So option 2 is ruled out. And D is also incorrect because you are not paying for the commodity with your information, you're paying for the commodity with your money. So that is also not the correct option. Now, why is it option 1 and 3? Why are you performing invisible labor here? You are not told that your activity is being collected as data and that data is being sold as a commodity to who knows when and where. Because that information is not passed on to you, the labor that you are performing in the form of your activity is not compensated. Not only is it not compensated, it is not even made transparent to you. That is why it's invisible labor. You are not aware that you are performing this labor that will ultimately go on to earn somebody some money. That's why it's invisible. Why is it atomized? Think of what the word atomized means. It is small, it is a fundamental unit. Every single thing that you do becomes a data point. That is why it is atomized labor. Every single click is datafied. Every single purchase is datafied. So because of this minute nature of the labor that you perform and how each thing, each small thing can be broken down into a commodity and sold, that is why it's atomized. I hope that makes sense to you. If there are any questions in this regard, I can take them now. But that's it for the assignment questions. If there are any larger conceptual clarifications that you need, please feel free to type them or unmute yourself and ask right now. Has anyone faced any difficulty in answering any of the assignment questions? If so, please feel free to let me know. For the exam, you will be expected to perform similar kind of analysis. So essentially, you will have recall questions, pay close attention to your lectures. There will be concepts that are discussed there. So some portion of your exam questions will be about recollecting what is exactly discussed in those sessions and answering them based on that. Some of them will be like your assignment questions. You'll be given a scenario and you'll be asked to comment on it or pick the most appropriate option. So rely on your assignments to tell you what kind of analysis is leading you to the answer. And if there are questions about that, please feel free to ask me on the discussion forum. So our assignment questions will be very useful in terms of preparing for the exam. There are also comprehension passage-based questions where you will be given excerpts from certain texts that you encounter in the lectures. And then you will have to answer 2 or 3 questions based on your understanding of the excerpt that is provided. These will be slightly more detailed and will require some deeper engagement with the concepts that were discussed, and you will have to connect the dots here. So you will be expected to perform some kind of analysis here, but of course, all of the questions are multiple choice questions. So yeah, please keep that in mind while prepping. But other than that, you should ideally not face any difficulty in preparing for the exam. Pay close attention to the readings that are referred to in the lectures. I will prepare a folder with some reading material that you encounter in the lectures and pass it on to you, hopefully by day after tomorrow. And you can write to me if you have any queries on that matter. But if there are no other questions, I think we can take it up later on the discussion forum if you have any clarifications needed. I will stick around for another 5 minutes to see if anybody needs any clarification, and then we can go ahead from there. Thank you. NPTEL team, are you around? Okay, if there are no further questions, I think this is a good point to close this meeting. As I said before, please feel free to write on the discussion forum if you have any other questions. Thank you.